Senator Durst.
Mr. President, to debate the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. To begin, this has been an interesting journey to get to this point today. And I think that I appreciate the wisdom and the insight that the senators that have been debating and those that have spoken to me privately have expressed. And I appreciate all of their insights and consideration. To start off with, let me just say that I support a state exchange. In concept, in practice, I support a state exchange. The question is whether or not Senate Bill 1042 is the state exchange that the state of Idaho should have. In reaching my conclusion, I start to think about the state exchange that we've got before us, kind of like the concept of Betamax. We're all old enough, even me, to remember Betamax. Those were the tapes that tried to compete with the VCR, and guess what? It failed. But yet there were still tons and tons of folks that went out and said, you know what, I want to be the first to try it. It's supposed to have better video quality. It's supposed to have better audio quality. Geez, I should get that. The technology hadn't been proven yet. And so all those early adopters found out that while they had something that, when it worked well, it was great, but unfortunately, it broke all the time. See, the reason was because all the news and all the information that was supposed to come out hadn't yet. I think we find ourselves in a very similar position today. We want to go rush out and get the new thing. I think it'd be prudent for us to step back and wait and let a few releases go through first and see how it actually works before we go and invest taxpayer dollars on this project. So, what are my concerns? My first concern, first and foremost, is that of consumer protection. As the senator from 33 admitted, this bill isn't perfect. And I would contend that the biggest imperfection of this bill is protecting those consumers. It is my view that we have a responsibility as senators to protect the consumer at all costs. That has to be our first mission. That is my first mission, Mr. President. And I feel as if we've missed that boat. Why? Because this bill lacks legislative oversight. And with all due respect to our friends across the rotunda, the trailer bill that's coming doesn't fix it either. I was told that by some of I emailed all the freshmen about their trailer bill, and I said, you know, here's some ideas that I have to improve it. Would you guys consider making an amendment to your change so that we can do it all at once? And they said, well, we only got to do things that the gentleman on the second floor approved of. We had other ideas, but he would be okay with those, so we couldn't put those in our bill. I found that interesting because I'm in the legislative branch. I'm in the policy-making branch. It's my job to decide. It's our job to collectively decide what goes in and out of bills. You know, one of the things that I really struggle with Senate Bill 1042 is the ability for us to review guidelines and bylaws that are written by the governing board. I recall my freshman year in the House going to an NCSL conference in Denver and sitting down with a group of Republican lawmakers from Georgia. And we got to talking about our faiths and talking about, you know, things that we had in common. And we started talking about Jimmy Carter, who I have a lot of affinity for, but they didn't. And that was... But what they said, you know what, we really envy you in Idaho because you have the right to review the rules that the state agencies publish. They said, geez, we'd give anything to have that right. We'd love to be able to do that. And here we are in Senate Bill 1042 saying, you know what, despite the fact that this is a huge change in public policy, we're not going to let us continue to have that authority and that responsibility. And I think that's wrong. I think we should continue to want to have that authority. My next concern is on the impact on our physician community. My district is home to a lot of physicians, given the proximity to St. Luke's and the employment hub that is. I worry that the governing board that's presented here doesn't guarantee a single practicing physician. It doesn't. Not a single one. The one that's supposed to be the advocate for the patient isn't guaranteed a seat on this board. The phrase is loosely referred to as a health care provider. Well, that could be it could be a hospital, that could be an RN, that could be a dentist, that could be a chiropractor. It doesn't have to be the person that we expect to give us the best counsel in our healthcare decisions, which is our doctor. That person doesn't have to be at the table helping us make decisions. I think that's wrong. The next question and the next concern that I have is the impact of the sequester on this issue. And I really hope that the senator from 32 will address that, because I think that's a serious concern. If the federal government doesn't act the way that they should, doesn't step up to the plate and do their job, then we at the state level are going to be forced to deal with it ourselves. And I worry that under this provision, costs will be shifted to consumers to make up the difference. And that goes to my next concern, which is the consumer cost. The point's been made that this exchange is supposed to be, quote, financially self-sustaining. Now, the federal exchange requires that most of the costs of operating are not borne by consumers, by the users of the system. We have no such guarantee in this bill. No such guarantee. In fact, it's likely, and if given the presentation from what we've heard by the gentleman on the second floor and his representatives, the likelihood is that the consumers will pay the vast majority of the cost of running this exchange. That to me is unfair. And in fact, we call it a fee, but I've sat in a lot of committee hearings, Mr. President, and I've heard my colleagues on this side, in the Senate and in the House, lambast a fee increase for 25 cents from a group that said that they wanted it. And yet we're not willing to stand up and say that we want the authority to approve fees on folks that are forced to enter into an exchange market. We're abdicating that responsibility, folks. That bugs me. I want to be able to say that that's the appropriate fee increase, that the balance is being made properly between provider and consumer. I want to have the final say in that. And in this legislation, we don't. You know, personal budgets are finite. Unlike the federal government, we can't just print cash. Well, we can try, but it typically ends poorly. And if these fees increase, it's going to take money away from our budgets to be able to do other things. It's going to take money away from families to be able to take trips to Disneyland. It's going to take money away from being able to buy groceries. Those are real-life decisions that will be impacted by the lack of legislative oversight and specificity within this legislation. That's just the reality. Without having that sort of control here at the state legislature, those are the impacts that will occur. There's been a comment that the state of Idaho has lower premiums. That's true today. That's true today. But also the reality is that Idaho has a disproportionate number of uninsured. Relative to our population, we have a higher uninsurance rate than virtually any other state in the country. So I would contend, right now what we've seen is we've seen people that can afford to be insured are currently insured. Those people tend to be higher educated, better off, and healthier. So as soon as we start dumping, it's just like this, it's like the idea of a swimming pool. We've got the people that are well-dressed, they took a shower before they got in the pool, they're well-manicured, they jumped in the pool stays clean. But guess what? I'm bringing all my toddlers over, and they're in swim diapers. They're going to get in the pool too. That pool's going to get dirty. That means that the cost of the insurance is going to go up for everyone, because that's how shared risk works. The more that the uninsured get into the pool, and the more that the unhealthy folks get into this pool, the higher the costs are going to go, and that competitive advantage that we have today will be eliminated. Just two more points, Mr. President. The previous speaker, Senator from Ford, just said, you know, these don't have to be state employees. I actually have a problem with that. Because at least I know that a state employee has certain rights. That there are laws that protect how they are hired, who's qualified, and how they are dismissed. And as a Democrat, that means something to me. I care about what happens to state employees, and I'd like to believe that something that's being done on behalf of the state has those same protections. I want to be able to know that if we're going to be operating something, that the people that are doing it are well qualified. They didn't get a job because their brother happened to be the director. I want to know that those are highly qualified folks. We have no such guarantee in Senate Bill 1042. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I have concerns about our decision to pick winners and losers. We've heard debate about, well, the current state insurance companies may lose out if this bill doesn't pass. That could be true. But if you're going to espouse the virtues of a free market, you cannot espouse the virtues of a free market and say that you want to say who's going to win and who's going to lose. That's how the free market works. Sometimes someone loses that you wanted to win. That's just the name of the game. If you want to rig the system and put things in so that certain groups are going to win, then fine, but let's be honest about it. That's not what this is about, because the bill says we want to have a market-driven situation. That's not what we'll have. We'll be picking the winners and the losers. That's not the free market. Finally, in closing, Mr. President, just a quick story about from my childhood. When I was 12 years old, being born in Idaho, I did what every 12-year-old typically does. I enrolled in Hunter's Ed, and I was pretty spastic. It's probably a surprise to the Senate here. I was kind of all over the place. I hadn't been given medication yet, and I started to think about. I loved hunting. I loved the idea. My parents had taken me out whistle pig hunting, and we'd just like to shoot them. And I really wanted to start shooting bigger stuff that people would actually care if I killed it or not, besides the neighbor's cat. Just kidding. But I started to think about what I could do, and I went through this course, and I watched the field dressing part, which kind of grossed me out, and I thought, I'll never shoot a deer in my life, so I don't have to do that. But I took the written test. I got a perfect score on the written test. I was really proud of myself. Well, I went out to take the field, and we went and did the marksman exam. I scored the highest point score in the group of students that I was with, partly because I'd been shooting whistle pigs, and they're small and they move fast, so I knew how to shoot. But then I took the field exam, and I forgot the number one rule of Hunter's Ed, which is know your target. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say that the senator from District 9 is right on. We're in the dark. And just like I failed that course because I pointed at something and I didn't know what was behind it, we're shooting in the dark today. We have a responsibility to know what our target is, and without all the rules from the federal government already in place, we don't know what those are. If we want to make an educated decision, we need to make sure that all the information is properly before us before we do that. And Mr. President, with that, I'll be voting no.